All right, so welcome back to Spearfactor, everybody. Today we have Captain Dan Walsh. He has been running boats for since the 70s, and I cannot imagine what you've seen just in your frequency of going offshore and seeing how the ocean's changed over the years for the good and the bad, or the worse, whatever. So welcome to the show, Captain.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and hopefully we can have some good fun and tell some sea stories.
Oh yeah, always, always. Okay, so let's look. I mean, with all the guests, right? Everybody spearfishes. So, rather than just keep on going back through, how did you get started spearfishing? I really we'll briefly get into that, but I really want to get into, I guess, some sea stories like you're talking about and your experiences running boats and the different people and the different places and situations where you had to kind of maybe think outside the box a little bit, or you were surprised, you kind of underestimated something or whatever. You learned something, let's say that, in all your travels and the unique experiences.
Well, someone remind me to tell, we'll talk a little bit later, but I've got, pretty much I've run boats in California, Baja, Hawaii, a little bit in the Caribbean, not much. But remind me a little while to talk about going out to Cortez Banks with a group from Arizona, because it's a pretty good one. But things have changed a little bit since, I first got certified as a diver in 71. I never took courses, until then, and I'd been diving before then in high school. And I went to a dive shop and rented a tank, and it had the rules: do this, don't do that. The one I remembered was don't hold your breath. I didn't know why until I took a scuba class. But my experience is just I've had a lot of places to go, a lot of things to do, working both on a boat as a scuba instructor, in the diving industry, as a manufacturer, as an underwater videographer for TV shows. So it's just enveloped my whole life, actually, and I've been very fortunate, very fortunate.
No, and I can clearly relate to that. I just feel like any of us that are into diving and surfing even, or any of the water stuff, and then we're able to tie in our work with what we love to do, it's just phenomenal. And what I also find is like your experience level goes through the roof because you're on the water every single day for the most part. And
yeah, I mean, I had just as an aside, or an example of that, I should say, is I have over 1,500 logged days just at San Clemente Island. So, I kind of know the place pretty well, and Kona Coast. But yeah, that's not only is it my favorite place to dive, but I know the place really well, and I know all the spots and the pinnacles and all that by dead reckoning or something before there was GPS, before there was all the fancy sides, anything. We had a flashing fathometer that it was a little thing. It went in a circle, and you had one was at the top, and if it was 60 feet, this thing would be flashing down here. And that's how, and we'd look on the shore, we'd look around and say, okay, like there's a place called Window Pinnacle on the lee side of San Clemente called, by a place called Little Flower. But if you look up on the top there's a thing that looks like a window, and there's a little rock in the middle. So if you sort of line up on that, and then you look down to Pyramid Head down that way, and there's the light and a tripod down there. And if you kind of take those two lines and you look at your flasher and you're about 35, 30 feet, you found a pinnacle. And that's how I did my whole career. I mean, now I've got a small skiff with Simrad, everything, and the thing does everything. And I'm quite intimidated by it because it's got so much stuff that I'm still trying to figure out how to use. But anyway, it's just what you're used to.
No, you're totally right. Like in GPS, the pluggers and the daggers and all that stuff have not been around really that long. Like I remember when I first started working on the water, it was the same way. It was like we just line up the terrain. And it's funny because depending on what the water depth is, I mean, you'll be right on target every time.
Yeah.
And we would do the same thing. Obviously, we do it quite often when we surf. We just line up in the right spot. And it's the same thing where this one wreck we used to dive and get lobster. It's like we didn't have any of that stuff. We just lined it up. And people were always surprised. They're like, I can't believe you just did that. I'm like, well, it just makes sense, you know?
Yeah, our most sophisticated thing we had on one of the boats on the bottom scratcher that I ran was an old radar that you could barely see it as the thing, the screen was so worn out. And when we would go, I'd take the boat down to Bonitas or Sacramento Reef or wherever. That was our, we used our watch, and we used the speed, and we used charts, and we used dividers, and we used all this stuff, and the radar we just sort of verify where we were, just kind of barely see an outline of the coastline, if the radar would show it to us, and that's how we did it. Same thing with all the dive sites all along Baja. It was just. Now I can't imagine, I've been on boats, and I've taken a couple boats, private yachts down there, and we went to San Bonitas Island. We have all this electronics. I'm looking at it all, and just amazed.
You kind of touched upon something too. You talk about all these electronics, and they're really good until they stop working. And that's the one thing I wanted to impress with you, knowing how long ago you've been doing this, is that I tell a lot of the newer guys, like, you need to pay attention to your compass, because when the fog rolls in and all of a sudden you don't have radar on your boat, if you don't have radar on your boat or whatever, you need to know to take a back azimuth, or you need to pay attention to see which way the swell's going. Like all these cues that I've had to learn through failure when I was out at Todos Santos Island on a jet ski, and then the fog came in so thick we couldn't see. But I try to remember, like, okay, when we came out, we left the corral, we had this, yep. And then the swell was coming this way, and okay, and we got pretty close. We almost got, crushed on the beach by way. But those things that I feel like, especially with newer boaters and guys that are thinking about getting a boat. Today when I was surfing, somebody asked me, like, hey, so what kind of boat should I get? And I was like, one that you don't think you need, like, start small and then grow bigger. Don't, get a boat that, if you've never owned a boat before, you're going to grossly underestimate the cost and the time associated with it. But with you're unique because, you're running much bigger vessels with the responsibility of a bunch of divers. And I know from running dive crews, you never know what you're going to get with people.
Well, yeah, let me tell you something. What I used to do, even when I was an instructor, but then when I was running boats, especially like the Bottom Scratcher or the Spirit of Adventure, one of the other boats, I would at the first dive site, I would have the crew all sort of just on alert. Let's just watch how the passengers are putting their gear together. That is a telltale sign. And the ones that would put the backpacks on the tank upside down, okay, those got special attention. And I would also, we had our rescue boards, same thing San Diego lifeguards use. We'd have those ready to go if we needed it. And I would sit and watch, and then I'd watch the dives. And I would watch somebody come up, especially if we were in a kelpie area. And you could just tell after a while, you just know what looks normal and what doesn't look normal. And it's hard to put into words. You see it, and you act accordingly. And then with the group, the story I was going to say about going after Cortez Banks, I had a group on board at San Clemente Island from Arizona. Pretty good group of divers, but not real good group of divers. So I have to assess, okay, are these guys, and they were hell-bent on going out to Cortez Banks, which is 100 miles off the San Diego coastline. It's 40 miles from San Clemente Island. And it's a 4-hour boat ride out there. There's no land out there. So we would do live boat dives. In the earlier days, we would do a live boat dive. A live boat dive means you get a group of people together, maybe 5 or 6 divers or 4 divers. You say, hey, this is a dive site for you. They jump in, and the boat just makes a big giant circle, and you just drop people off. Kind of like when the Navy SEALs are training, they do the same thing. So we just make a big giant circle. We come back around, and when they come up, we say, just get together, and I spin the boat around. Say, okay, come on in. Up we go. Well, this group wasn't quite ready for that. So, I guess I'll tell it. So what happened was that these people were really ready to go to Cortez Banks. And so 2:00 in the morning, I get the boat started. We're anchored in Pyramid Cove, and I get off China Point, and I said, these guys aren't going to do it. So I put the boat in circles. I just put the boat and started driving the boat in big circles, and I started driving through my own wake. And I made it real bumpy, and then I'd go in the trough and make it really uncomfortable. Then pretty soon, the dive master came up and he says, "It's kind of rough out, isn't it?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, maybe we should stay at St. Clement Island." I went, "You got it."
Good call. Yeah.
So that's what we did. The flip side is, as scuba diving as an instructor changed a lot from the time I started in '72 to now, and the levels and sophistication of divers became more and more dependent on equipment and skills. So then when we would take the boats out to Cortez, we would anchor the boat. And if the weather wouldn't allow us to anchor, we wouldn't go, because then we'd put out a big current line, have a little Zodiac, something, because the skill level was such that live boat diving wasn't in the picture for them. And it's just how it is. Sorry, but you know what? I'm ultimately responsible to not only their families, but to the Coast Guard, the insurance company, the boat owner, God knows anyone else. And I'm not going to put them or me or my license or anything else in danger. So sometimes you got to do little tricks like that. And I didn't do that very often, but this group I was really nervous for them, and they were very, very, we got to go, and
yeah, that's a lot of that's being naive too.
Yeah.
And they just don't know. Everybody wants to dive Cortez Banks, and they don't know that it's super windy out there often, or that, out there, because it's the middle of the ocean, the currents and everything. You're so much more you're susceptible to a lot of things, but also, those open ocean dives like that, it's real easy to lose, especially if there's some swell.
And then the fog comes in sometimes out there. It's that's nervous captain time right there, and you just, But now, a fun thing that actually happened, one of our deckhands, John Miking, actually one day, he's a real good surfer, and he now runs a tuna boat out of Koala Basin in Honolulu. But he got on one of our rescue boards, and we towed him all the way from Cortez Banks into the dock. And he literally, when we got to the dock at Point Loma, and we sent food, we sent a beer, we sent things down the line to him. And when he got in, I stopped the boat, he paddled, and he literally jumped on the dock, and we threw the line to him. It was pretty fun. And as another aside, his girlfriend was our cook. And who do you think the cook was? I just happen to have something here. I'll see if you can. You want to take a guess? Someone pretty popular. Went to Mesa College, was taking drama. You ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Can you see that?
Annette Binning?
Yep. Annette
Wow.
Binning. Yeah. She was a great diver, and she hated cooking we always cooked the same thing on the boats, the hamburgers or whatever.
Yeah.
But she was she was a cook.
That is so random.
Yeah.
Wow.
She finally came clean on that on one of the late night shows with Colbert or somebody. Finally, she mentioned the fact that when she was going to college, she worked on a dive boat and she was a cook.
That's yeah. So for a lot of the people that don't know, this is something interesting. I think that people that don't know the history, I guess, of San Diego or Southern California, can you kind of get into the whole bottom scratcher boat and what that means?
Sure. The San Diego was kind of the hub of free diving and spearfishing, although someone in Italy may think something different. But in the United States, it was San Diego, and there was guys way back when. Jack Bradonovich lived in Point Loma area. He was, I think, he was a custodian at Point Loma High School. I think it was that. Anyway, there you go. Okay, so he and the guy named Wally Potts and a few other guys back in the 30s started a dive club, and you had to have it was an exclusive dive club, no scuba. They pretty much made all their own stuff. And I want to say that I do this right, so I'm going to read it. In order to get in the club, you had to bring up 3 abalones from a depth of 30 feet, catch a shark of any kind with your bare hands, and haul up a live lobster from a slippery underwater ledge that was, a live lobster. about 3 feet long. They said 3 feet long, but I don't know. The biggest lobster I ever got was not 3 feet long, but it was big.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the history of the club, and ultimately they had about 20-ish members. The last member was a guy named Marty Passos, who was inducted in the early 90s, I believe it was, and he was the historian. The club, obviously, they're all passed away. I believe there might be one guy left, but he doesn't dive. Obviously, he's in his 90s. But they really were the innovators. They didn't have wetsuits. They wore wool jackets or not jackets, sweaters. They ultimately had fins. Someone else invented a fin, and they started using it. And then it became time for game collecting, and they did a lot like even me. My first thing that I went to the thrifty drugstore and I bought a trident, and I put it on a pole spear or on a broom handle, and somewhere I got some surgical tubing, and that was my first, spear gun, if you will. These guys were a lot more sophisticated than that, and ultimately Jack was able to make mechanisms to start making guns. Wally would make reels. So the Bottom Scratchers are kind of like this revered club, supposedly first dive club in the United States. I don't know, I can't verify that, but I think that's probably correct. Bill Johnston was one of the members, and he had a boat called the Vid that most people never heard of. It was Vid was a very important diver. And he would, if the weather, it's kind of like, you have surf check, and before all the social stuff, you'd get a call or somebody would say waves are good at Garbage or somewhere else, and you'd go there. But Bill would say, okay, Cortez, it's on. And he'd get the guys on the Vid, and they'd go out and go do their lobster diving and everything else. He then was partners with Bill Hardy at San Diego Diver Supply, which was one of the premier dive stores in San Diego back then. I had the fortune to work at the one on Midway for a while, and then over at La Jolla. They had 2 locations, long since gone. But Bill and Bill Hardy ran the stores. Then Bill Johnston wanted to go more into boats. He was a Navy guy, World War II, but Pearl Harbor and stuff like that. Bill Hardy wound up with the stores. Bill Johnston built the Bottom Scratcher in 1969 here in San Diego. A guy named Don Blackman built it. And it's, if any of your viewers and listeners know of Blackman Boats, this is the same company that built the Bottom Scratcher. And then a few years later, the Sand Dollar, the sister ship. They were very similar boats, very popular. The Bottom Scratcher guys would come out now and then. I've got some pictures that, I don't know if you want any pictures, but I've got a few pictures of Jack Berdanovich and some of these other guys going out on the boats, and they just the stuff they wore was just unbelievable. The equipment they had, the spear guns and things were just not like anything that you see today. It was very rustic, but it worked.
I saw some of those pictures you sent me with the dive belt, aka the lead shot.
Yeah,
like wrapped around. That was classic.
Yeah. And so anyway, so other dive clubs, sprung up in Southern California. There's the Neptunes in Long Beach and those guys. And anyway, there's a bunch of them. But the Bottom Scratchers were pretty much the ones. They had jackets, satin jackets, and they had all that whole sort of stuff and hats, and they got together. And I was honored enough to know of some of them, worked for one of them, and really enjoyed their company. They were all wonderful watermen, and I dove with Jack and Bill a few times, and hell, I was half or a third their age, and they would just leave me in the dust. It just their skill level was just, and it's interesting enough. I'm 6 foot tall. These guys were both, Bill reminded me of Popeye. He had big giant arms, a little guy, and Jack was about the same. Wally was more like me, just kind of big guy. But it was a lot of fun to be with them, and they are still highly respected. If you just say Bottom Scratchers in a group of Spearos, I mean, they know who they are.
Yeah, I think that's kind of touched upon a pretty important thing too, as far as being one-dimensional, just in general, like with you're either a diver or you strictly surf, but like being a waterman is something entirely different. And I think that's something that everybody should try to strive for. Not for anything other than, if you love the ocean and really want to be comfortable and safe in it, you've got to understand everything in its totality, like in its entirely understand how everything like functions and moves. And I feel like those guys, they didn't have the best equipment. They didn't have this. They didn't need it because they understood how everything worked, and they didn't rely, like you were talking about with how diving, scuba diving, people rely so much on their equipment and their, this and that and all their little gadgets and heads up display and all this crap. And to me, I look at it as just more shit to go wrong and cause me problems. I like simple is better, which again, when I was younger, kind of gradually led me into spearfishing. But I think that's just a big thing that you pressed upon is like being a good waterman, like driving a boat, operating a boat. Those things are really separate you being a good diver from a phenomenal diver. And those things will very much so make it a higher likelihood that you're going to be coming home to your family at the end of the day if something were to go wrong, right? Because everybody's great when it's like, for example, and then I'll stop talking. I'll let you two be talking. But we get people at work that I'd be like, hey, what's your scuba diving experience? I got certified and I dove in Fiji and Hawaii. And you're like, that's great. We're diving in, 6 inches of murk sometimes in San Diego Bay.
Yep.
And they freak out. They can't handle it. So, understanding all those things just gives you peace of mind if you happen to get in those situations. You know how to get out.
Well, and the basics of diving became, and I worked for a manufacturer. We manufactured we had 900 items we manufactured, a company called Aquacraft, including Bandito Spearguns. But what I've seen, and I've worked for other companies, wetsuit companies, and doing video production and things like that. They pretty much run out of things, and it became, Tabata became really big. Okay, we're going to make fins that are yellow and pink and blue and the mask. We're going to make clear silicone ones now. And I mean, a regulator is a regulator, a mask is a mask. So now it's interesting in that the past probably 3 years, maybe, freediving has become this all of a sudden, it's the new thing. And so all the agencies, now I did a course, an FII course with a guy named Mark Lozano here in Oceanside.
Right, I'm Mark, yeah.
And of course there's PFI, and I did a Frenzel course with Ted Hardy for PFI. And frankly, being a scuba instructor and coming in with all the habits of a scuba instructor and scuba diver, I was probably the worst student in Mark Lozano's class because I brought all this dive baggage with me. And but that's now it looks like that's the next revenue generating area for the dive industry. It's another one of those. There we go. I thought I put that on quiet. Yeah. So anyway, that's the big thing now is freediving, and we'll see where it all goes. There's not much more you can do, as I said, with a regulator. Cameras are now all pretty much GoPros, where you take your iPhone and you put it in a case and you do your thing. My underwater video production work, we had cameras that my arms can't show you how big it was, but Betacams, when I did stuff in Australia for Shark Week and things. But now there's a $40,000 camera in a housing is about, the picture quality isn't as good as this iPhone.
Right.
So that aspect of the diving and guys put the GoPros on their spear guns and stuff like that's kind of fun to watch, but a little bit of that goes a long way if their head's always going like this or they got a head mount or something like that. You can't watch it. So spear gun equipment, I've got stuff, and if you'd like, I can send a lot of pictures of all that, but I've got old Pradanovich guns. I sort of collect those. The mechanism on a Pradanovich gun was very essentially almost interchangeable with a Voigt Swim Master spear gun, which is now known as a JBL spear gun.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember the Voigt. Yeah, the whole thing. I was a kid, but I remember all of that stuff. Yeah, it's funny. That's what happened to Voigt.
Yeah. And in fact, I still have my old Voigt sawed-off Magnum. And I've told others, I spoke at a North County Depth Finders, I think in December, I can't remember. And I brought a bunch of spear guns to show, a little show and tell. And I told them, I said, look, this is not my favorite gun. I held it up. But this gun, I've shot more fish with this gun than any of these other ones, these fancy Rife gun I have, or these Pradanoviches, or anything else. So, it's kind of like having an old Chevy. You just like to have it, and every trip I go on, it goes with me. And it always goes in the water at least once. But now, my God, I know I don't have any custom guns. I don't, I just turned 69 a week ago. I think I've got plenty of guns. I don't know that I need to go out and be getting crazy with guns and everything. I'm also, as I've mentioned one time, I think in my notes to you, that I'm kind of a blue collar spear fisherman. And I was with Terry Maas when he shot his big tuna. I was running the boat. I was in the water. And that's all well and good, but, I just like to shoot something, bring it home, feed it to the family, give it to the neighbors, do whatever, I like to have fun and enjoy myself. I'm not out to prove anything, I guess, is my point.
That's the whole point, right? It's just, that's why we do it. Like before social media, if your main focus nowadays is to hold up the biggest fish or whatever it is, why do it? Like, because 20 years ago, there was none of that. So would you have even spearfished, or you would even dove like back then? I don't know.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing with the Terry Maas, thing you brought up, like with this big tuna. That's just a classic picture from what Terry did. That book, Blue Water Hunter, and that was at Guadalupe Island, right?
It was on the Sand Dollar. And when Terry got it, I was pretty much, it was a private charter. Guy Howard Benedict and some of his other good Spiro buddies were on board, and they were targeting big tuna. Now, back then, there wasn't the big great white shark issue that they're all over the place there now. They were there, but not in the numbers that they are at this point. So we would get in the water. It's funny. It's the only place really that I've dived, other than Dangerous Reef in Australia, the only place that I was kind of, I'd kind of look around a little bit, because I knew, all right, I may see one here, but at the point, all of a sudden, I'm in the water and I'm just looking around and I hear all this commotion, probably, 40, 50 yards away from me, and there's a gun, flaring a gun, and people are yelling and hollering, and what the hell's going on, so, one of two boat captains, Bill, was on the boat, and so I'm in the water, so I have to go swim over, and I just, look at this. Holy crap, look at that fish. So I swam back to the boat as fast as I could, and he had all the help he needed. And I would probably have been more in the way than anything else. And I grabbed my Nikonus camera and I jumped back in the water and I took a whole bunch of pictures of the fish. And I gave a bunch of the pictures to Terry. So there's probably a pretty good chance that if you've seen a picture of the fish in the water, chances are pretty good maybe I took that picture. And the fun part about the whole deal was really how excited everybody was. It was like kids at Disneyland, and everybody was so supportive to help. Then the problem became, what are we going to do with this thing? So, the Sand Dollar, the fish holds are not like a modern boat now that you can put a fish like that in an RSW tank or a refrigerated seawater tank or ice hold or something. So we had to improvise. We had a Zodiac that we were using as a support boat. So we put that up on the bow, and then we put ice in the bottom, and then it took about 8 of us to haul the fish in, not over the exact point of the bow, but just to the side. And that was the only way we could get it in the boat. And we're yanking on it, got it up over there and into the Zodiac, and put more ice on it, and covered it up with a tarp. And it was about, from the day he shot it to the time we got it into San Diego, was about 5 days. And it's about a 2-day drive just to go to Guadalupe Island from San Diego. The fish, I can't say that I can't verify this, but common sense would tell you that this fish was well over 400 pounds. But when it was weighed 5 days after he got it, it had dehydrated a bit and things like that. It was 398. I think, and some change, maybe 398.2 or whatever. I don't know the exact weight anymore, but anyway, it was really exciting. It was great to be part of it. Terry is most any of your Spearo fans know that he's like the name as far as spearfishermen go. He does have the book that you mentioned, and there's a copy in my other room. I don't know who doesn't have a copy of that book. And and he's going on to that was his thing, and that was all these guys' thing, was to go out for a big trophy fish. So for me, it was unique to see that aspect of, it's like big game hunting, that people go on safaris, and this was a safari on a boat, down at a very, very unique place. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
And what gear were they using? Like, I think he had, was it lifeguard floats filled with foam, or what was he doing? What gear? Do you remember what gear he was using?
Yeah, they were. It was pretty basic stuff. He did have some lifeguard floats that were filled with foam. I recall some that were kind of like a dark orange. They almost looked like they took net floats and made something like combined a bunch of net floats and made things with that. It wasn't like it is now, where you got inflatables, or you got the companies here in town that make them, in San Diego that make them, and quite a bit different. So it's to do the same thing now. I don't want to take anything away from any of these Spearos that are going out here offshore to San Clemente Island or out and shooting a big fish, but I can assure you, it's a lot easier for them than it was for Terry back then.
Right. That's like I feel like that's kind of common sense, because, you do anything the first time, and people, to start with, people don't even think it's possible. Yeah. So, and I remember the first time, shooting a 200-pound tuna was the most humbling experience in my life. Like, to see it just take down floats. And I would have never guessed that. Looking back, like, I remember going after tuna with like probably 30 pounds of float, thinking, oh, I'll be good, and you're just stupid. But with Terry and those guys in the 80s, and I'm sure that the guys that I know of, and that doesn't mean a lot, because I'm sure there's guys doing it all over the world, same thing, back in that time period, where they're just going out, they're probably did a lot of calculations, I'm assuming too, and experience, and, to be some of the first ones to go after those fish, like, there's some steep learning curves there, Yeah. They went through the learning curves for us.
Yeah. I don't think that, I know that nobody thought that this was going to be, a fish of that size was going to be brought on board. Right. Had we even thought that would have been the case, we would have figured out before we ever left the dock a way to handle a fish that size. We figured, we'll be good. These guys are going to they'll shoot a 180 to 250 or something like that. And we can manage that. We can get it in the fish holes. We can open up the deck hatches and get it, take care of these things. Not this baby. This was a whopper, of all times. I mean, that's the biggest fish I've ever seen in the water as far as tuna goes. I've seen some big grouper, but this was, it's still today. I mean, it just impresses the hell out of me that he saw it. Thank God he got a good shot on it. And then, I don't know who got a second shot. I really don't know. That might be in one of the chapters in his book. I guess I'd have to go back and read it. Yeah. But anyway, it was the morale and the excitement it made the guys that were getting like the 180 pounders, and then they're out there getting their personal best. And then this happened. So it was kind of like an ego crusher for them. But overall, everybody, we were so stoked for him. We couldn't believe that this happened, and that for me to be a part of it was just as exciting for me as if I would have shot the fish.
Yeah, I had a moment like that where I shot like a 70-pound dogtooth, and I was all proud. It was like my personal best, and I think it was literally the same day, the same weekend, in another part of the world. Brandon Waller shot like a 200-pound dogtooth and posted it, and it just looked ridiculous. And I was like, damn it. Okay. Like back at the drawing board. Yeah. But it still made it special to me. It was awesome. But so how many times do you say you've been to Guadalupe Island, with diving and spearfishing? And have you noticed any patterns? Like, how we go so much and things, we start to notice patterns, like with the sharks. Are they seasonal? before we had all this tracking stuff, I think I remember reading somewhere where someone like there was that, okay, this month is iffy. If you get there before this month, you're good. Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, I did. And just so for the record, there was a boat, a guy in town, a dentist, had a small charter dive boat, and he took people down to Guadalupe, well, like in the 70s, possibly late 60s, early 70s. And there was a shark attack back then. So the sharks were there. Sharks were there, but not in the numbers now. And I think between Shark Week and the shark expeditions
was that Al? Was that shark attack you're talking about? Was that Al?
I believe it was. Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, and I don't remember what year. Was that the 60s? It was late 60s.
I think it was because I remember Al Jr. saying he was about 6.
Yeah.
And
So there's if there was yellowtail, and then it seems now there's been there was bluefin. Now the bluefin seems to have been replaced by yellowfin, and so now the sport boats are going out there getting some big yellowfin. So it's sort of moved around. It's changed a little bit, but I think I've been there 3 times. I think 2 for dives. It was just a kind of a ball buster to get out there. And that's not a beginner diver place, period. I mean, it's just you really have to have some experience to even think about paying money to go on a trip like that. I've been on one fishing trip too, and it was just real sharky. It was a summer trip. It was just real sharky.
So would you notice like in the summertime, it's more sharkier there than, I don't know. You said you've been there 3 times. Have you been there like in the wintertime too? No, just summertime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Fair weather boat operator. How does you?
Hey, as the older I get, I welcome that title because there's nothing worse than beating the crap out of yourself. That's not fun.
I've done that. I've done plenty of that in Hawaii and even here. I mean, it's the first day that Bill Johnston essentially handed me the keys to the bottom scratcher. I had a group from Mesa College, and they were doing a checkout dive. So I knew the island, so I took them into Pyramid Cove, and then it started getting crappy there. So we went over to the lee side, and while we were over there, the wind shifted. Now the wind's blowing directly on shore to the lee side, and I literally was live boat diving people between the shore and the dive. And I literally had the boat in less than 10 feet of water. And it's always funny because my fellow skippers on the fishing fleet, they'd see us at the Coronados or San Clemente or somewhere, and we're looking down, and when we're seeing eelgrass and Garibaldis, we're about in the right spot. You tell that to one of those guys, and they freak out. The last thing they want to see is eelgrass or a Garibaldi. So it's a difference in my skill set. I wouldn't. Yeah. I've run boats where we've gone fishing, but I am not a fishing boat skipper, and I'll be the first to tell you that. I love to fish. I know how to fish, but I'll stick to being a dive boat guy, and the skill set that it takes for that.
I completely understand that. Those guys. I live in Point Loma, and all the tunas, as we affectionately call them, all the Portuguese guys, their dads. Those guys are on another level as far as fishing goes, and I'm just a diver.
Yeah.
But they can teach. You can learn a lot from those guys as far as reading the waters and trying to find out where the fish are, and that's it keeps you humble. So you said San Clemente Island is your favorite place to dive, just like me. I love that place.
Oh, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah, that's so here's a little story. I took my friend from Guam. He was here visiting, and he'd never been off the island diving. He's been all around Micronesia, and that's kind of why I talked to you a little bit that one day about that. Everywhere in Micronesia diving, and he ended up coming here, and his first time here, he hit me up, and I said, well, yeah, I'll take you out. We're going to go. The weather's good. We're going to San Clemente Island. And the first time we put him in the water there, it's 80 feet of visibility. And the kelp forest, and the water was freezing for us. It was 58, freezing for fish. And we didn't see much, but it was beautiful, and that's the thing I love about that place is like, even if you don't see any fish, you spent the whole day just swimming around this beautiful kelp forest. And he kept popping up intermittently, just thanking me for bringing him because he had never seen anything like it. He was just, look over and I'd see him just diving through the kelp, just like checking it all out. This is incredible. It's a whole, I'm like, this is as good as it's going to get. So wait till next week and we dive back at home and play Loma and it's 3 feet of viz. And he's like, yeah, I'll stay on the boat, looking for sea bass, whatever. But yeah, that's that island. I've been out there for work and I've dove it, a few times, a handful of times out in, since I've got my boat, I dove it out Pyramid Cove quite a bit. And then the northern part of the island. And the northern part of the island just feels sharky to me. Oh boy, it feels sharky. But, it's just beautiful out there. So what are some of your best memories of diving San Clemente Island?
I'll tell you the absolute best one of all times. We had the boat anchored on the lee side of the island in a place called Little Flower. And it's just it's just beautiful. It's like everything you want in a California dive is right there. There's kelp, there's abalone, there's lobster, there's fish, there's a drop off. And it was a August summer night. There was a full moon and I jumped in the water and I sat down on scuba in about 20 feet, 25 feet of water. And I just sat there and my eyes acclimated and the moonlight was lighting stuff up and there's fish going by and the light from the moon. And it was just the most spectacular thing I've ever dove at San Clemente Island. I'll always remember it because I can't even put into words what I was seeing, and I just sat there for the longest period of time. And I'm sure that if it would have been today and to do that, I'd probably try to have a rebreather so I wouldn't make bubbles so I could really see what was going on. It was just gorgeous. Just gorgeous. There's a lot of places like that. And you mentioned the north end of the island. Did you dive out at the 9 Fathom spot? Where the purple hydrocoral gardens are out there.
Yeah. And then in West Cove.
Yep.
And runway area too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We used to do when I would have advanced classes, we would do we would call it a wreck dive on the Butler that's there in Northwest Harbor, and there's just so much to do there. It's the probably the best of California diving that there is now.
Yeah, that's what I told my friend too. I said it's all downhill from here unless we go to Baja.
Yeah. And Cortez Banks, I mean, it's beautiful. There's big fish out there, and it's typically if you've got a good day and you're not getting just beat up with surge or something, you've got wonderful visibility. That's how California is too. But the days, there aren't that many days out there that you can do that. So that's where the places that I've taken the boats down off Baja, where there's places that are now still like it was here in California 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. So you mentioned Baja, and I remember hearing on the Noob Spiro podcast too with you talking about that was your favorite place to travel. You think is in all the world is Baja.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I've been several places, and I don't get intimidated by a lot of things, and a lot of people. My dad, he went to Tijuana one time, and I don't know what happened, but he said he'd never go to Mexico again. I've driven to Cabo and Rancho Leonero and East Cape. I've done that close to 30 times, if not more. Well, I've done 25 trips just to Rancho Leonero. So anyway, I've driven down there, and the thing is, you have to kind of know the rules a little bit, and you don't stick out and look like you've got a $50,000 camper and surfboards and kayaks and stuff. I become like I tell people, be a blender. And I've got an F-350 with a Callan camper on it, and there's nothing on the outside of it. Everything's inside. I don't drive stupid. We don't drive at night, although I had a little mishap with that last trip. And
exactly.
Yeah, just a little one. but and I love it. I tell people you get down below San Quintin and you cross this bridge in El Rosario, and that's a whole different country down there. It really is. One of the things that I've always said, don't drive at night. And so my Spiro buddy lives across the street, decided, well, why don't let's go out, get a little early start out of San Ignacio. So we stayed in San Ignacio, and it was about 5:30 in the morning. it's just starting, not dark, but not light. And we're driving along. He's doing about 40 miles an hour because we don't want to push it. And suddenly he slams on the brakes. There's a big brown cow. My big dog just came to visit us.
I saw that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I've heard about cow tipping in the Midwest. We hit this cow at about 2 or 3 miles an hour. It bumped it and knocked it over a little bit. And when it got up, it gave us the big stink eye. It just walked away. However, it did about $500 damage to the front of my truck. It broke off the left headlight, and the grill was shot and everything. So that was once again. So now I didn't pay attention to my own rules and paid the price. It could have been a lot worse. It wasn't. But I have no problem going down to Baja, diving along the way, and driving. But if you've got any of your guys, that's Punta Chavado is one of my favorite places. L.A. Bay, which is close. I mean, yellowtail heaven there. You know, you've been. I'm sure you've made. How many trips have you made down to Baja? Probably a bunch, huh?
Yeah. You know what's funny is for like 10, 15 years, I would go down there surfing all the time, and it was bringing the gun. Just, if the surf's flat, it's something to do. And then slowly over time, it was leave the boards, let's go diving. This place is unreal. And I think the thing about Baja that's so amazing, it's 1,600 miles of coastline, and the population there is like 3 million or something like that. And the majority of them live right at the border.
Yeah.
So you talk about untouched. I mean, I'm sure, and maybe I could be dead wrong, and you would know more than I would, but I am positive there's got to be reefs there that someone has never even dove on, or a fish has never seen a diver. There's got to be. And somewhere in there, there's a world record fish waiting for me. That's like my big thing now, But just in general, like, it's such a unique place to dive because I remember taking my buddies down there and diving and on the Pacific side, and you see a parrotfish next to a pufferfish next to a calico, and then it's getting schooled up by a 20-pound yellowtail. And you're like, this whole thing is mine. Why are you here? And why are you here? You look in a hole and look for a grouper, and there's a pufferfish in there. And you're like, well, okay, you're here, but why is the calico here too? Like, it's just a unique place.
The first time I went to San Benito Islands, that's exactly what happened to me. And I'm going, what's this? It's like a angelfish. What's this thing doing here? And I'm out in the water looking to shoot a yellowtail or something. And, and there's calico bass, and there's a black sea bass, and here's a colorful little tropical thing. I had no idea what the hell it was. And an angelfish and little yellow and black one. And what's this all about? It's just that zone, and then it happens. And that makes it so much fun. And the Sea of Cortez side, there's still yellowtail there, and there's tuna and all that, but that's a whole different, area of fish and it just marine life and bottom and water and there's plankton, visibility. I've never really had as good a visibility on the Sea Cortez side because it's all the plankton and everything else in the water. But it's awfully, it's still very, very good place for marine life and everything, although it's not as good as it used to be. There's been a lot of, international, boats out there.
Pressure.
A lot of pressure on things. Yeah. But it's still good. L.A. Bay, like I said, is only about 10 hours south of San Diego. And if you want to just have a good, fun time going to spear some fish, that's a easy destination. And in the summer, the water's really warm. Around September, October, there's a bunch of whale sharks there. And usually at the south end of the bay. They stay down deep for a while, stay in the cool water, then they come up as the water starts to cool off. But that's a good one. Punta Chavado, I've been shot some nice grouper there. That's it's about 15 miles north of Mulegé, I think. And you have to go in on dirt roads and all that. And there used to be
let me caveat the Bay of LA thing. It's really dangerous, and the road's terrible now, and they'll shoot you as soon as you show up. So don't go there.
Oh,
That's
really?
A joke. That's a joke.
Oh. Yeah, actually, it's funny. I've been going there for so long that the kids, there's a guy that I would stay at the first time I went with my girlfriend and her friend, we camped on the beach at the south part of the bay Now that's all homes and it's closed off and you can't get there, but unless by boat, unless you own property. I stayed at a place called Reuben Daggett's Beach Camp. And when I first started going there, all they had were palapas, and they had one boat, and the boat launch was like the worst Baja, 1,000 course you could ever go on. They had a old Ford pickup jacked up several feet. Rust, I don't know, rust was holding it together, and that's how they would launch their Ponga. Well, now they improved the boat launch. All of his little kids and the ones I used to bring ice cream to in my little propane freezer, they're all now the boat captains there, and they do a really, really good job. But if you want to go shoot a yellowtail, that's a good spot to go. If you want to shoot something else, a grouper, that's a good place to go. If you want to see whale sharks, that's a good place to go.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned running a cruise, so let's talk a little bit about like tips on boat handling, rigging, being a good boat deckhand, being a boat good. Like, what is a good boat captain to you?
A good boat captain to me is somebody that has worked his way from worked all positions on the boat and knows as much about the boat as possible, and he gets respect by his actions. Just because you're the boss doesn't mean you earn respect. You don't deserve respect. You earn it. And I started out my career as a deckhand on the bottom scratcher at $10 a day, and that's a 24-hour day. And I was called on the hierarchy of a crew. There's the captain, there's the second ticket. If you're going to be out over 12 hours, then there's the cook, and then there's first deck, the main deckhand, and then there's second deckhand. Some boats, like some of the big, like the Spirit of Adventure, which I ran as a dive boat, as a fishing boat, and they may have a crew of like 8 guys, but essentially the same thing, just more of them. And so I learned, the first thing you learn as a deckhand, do what the captain says. That's the first thing you learn, okay? And the second thing you learn is how to tie a boat up and take a boat up, bring it into it, tie it to the dock and take it away from the dock. And then customer service is really important. You have to remember that people are there. It's like vacation time for them, whether they're fishing, diving, spearfishing, whatever. And then the captain, you just sort of keep it all together. Keep it all together, make sure everybody's having a good time. If somebody's having a bad day, maybe give them a little extra attention. I can name probably every a-hole passenger that I ever had to deal with, including one that I actually had to take a boat into town in Hawaii and put them off a boat. But the thousands of people that came on the boat and had a good time, they just all, it's all one and the same to me. And I always used to tell my crews, service, not servitude. And as the captain, my core belief was to be polite but firm. People expect, and the other side of it, when you're, we call ourselves skippers more than captains, but when you're the captain, everyone knows, okay, well, he's the captain, so he's the boss, so my thing was always try to not let people be intimidated by the fact that I had a title that the Coast Guard gave me, and that
yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I know exactly what you mean.
So that's, to me, that's what makes a good captain. A good deckhand is somebody that pays attention. He sort of can anticipate, what needs to take place on the boat, and he doesn't have to be told. It doesn't have to be constantly said, go do this, go do that, whatever. They know what to do. And as far as the handling part of it, I always made sure that the second ticket and the deckhands and even the cook had their opportunity to drive the boat, to anchor the boat. Well, the cooks didn't anchor the boat, but the other guys did. Pull up the anchors, and then depending on where they were in their journey to improve their skills, I would stand back and let them dock the boat. And right. Fortunately, the bottom scratcher had a real easy slip at Point Loma Sport Fishing Dock. It was at the very end, wide open over here, and all you had to do was, like I used to tell them, guys, what we're doing is a controlled crash. So we're going to come in, you're going to flip the boat around. If you're good, you can kind of slide it in like that and just put it right to the slip like this, If you're not really good, sometimes you kind of do this and back and forth and back it in and try not to wipe out that beautiful mahogany swim step that we had. And I think I only had one guy crunch that once, and it was a sound I didn't like. But I get the guys to do it all, and because ultimately those guys were then going to become second tickets and then captains themselves. So,
well, yeah, and I've kind of found through my own unique experience working in teams and things like that, what you're saying is like, if you develop people like staff development, if you let them be a part of something, they're going to have more of a vested interest in taking care of it, like, period. And then the other thing, like you were talking about with the skipper being called skipper or captain, and it's like, okay. You know who's in charge the first thing something goes wrong? The person that knows the most, and the person that can stay calm. And by definition, that should be the captain, So that inherent respect should be there based on your actions. It's exactly what you're saying, where it's like, it's not a given, it's an earned. Yeah. And if you have earned your way and you know everything, what's going on, you know the ins and outs of the boats, you don't have to know how to fix the thing. That's where you have engineers or something like that, but you have to understand how your boat, the what's normal for it, what's not normal, what it could be, and then turn the keys over and empower your crew to fix the thing that, that's their job. So I totally see what you're saying. And I want to go back to something too. You mentioned tying up the boat. That's the funniest thing too, because there's so many times you roll up to the dock and then everybody just stands there. You're like, okay, now it's time to tie the boat up. Like, come on, guys. Like, you know. So can you kind of go over, this sounds really basic, but I see this done over and over again, how to properly tie up a boat.
Okay. Before I forget, the one thing on respect, and then we'll move on to that, is that my crews all know I would never ask, and to this day, even in the television crews, I never ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself.
Right.
And that's how you earn respect. So that being said, okay, so as far as having the boat, tying the boat up, I've seen everything down at Dana Landing, and people, like, they don't realize, they're going to launch their boat, and if they don't have control of the boat, it's just going to drift away. And then I've seen one guy thinks he's going to launch the boat by himself and drag it with a line and go over to the dock. And no, that's not what happens. So you sort of, first off, understand what side of the boat you're going to tie up to the dock. All right. So if you've got your lines are over on the port side and you're going to dock and tie it up on the starboard side, maybe you better ask, if you're not sure what side you're going on, the guy that's running the boat, we'll say, okay, we're going to go, unless, of course, our slip at Point Loma, which was always the same. But if we were going to Catalina or going somewhere else and had to tie up, go to the fuel dock, the crew always knew, have the lines ready, have the fenders, not bumpers, have the fenders ready, and just anticipate what we're going to do. As I said earlier, we always called it a controlled crash. When I ran the Spirit in Hawaii, we used to go into Alaya Harbor, which has one of the fastest waves for surfing there is. And it goes right across the harbor.
Maui, right?
Yeah. And the prevailing wind comes off, it comes out of the northeast. And so you're coming in, so the wind is coming like this at you, you're coming in like this, but the dock is over here. So you come in like this, and now you just get about 30 feet off the dock and get in front of it and let the wind kind of push you in. And like I said, it's a controlled crash, and you just make sure that all you have to do is keep the boat parallel, Same thing if you're gonna launch a boat around here and you've got a lot of wind. If you're not quite sure what you're gonna do, then maybe get somebody. If somebody's on the dock, you can throw a line to, and you're not quite good with wind in your boat, maybe go in with a bow, throw a line, and then have them tie it, and then just kind of, if they'll take another line, do that, or tie up a line from the bow or the spring line, the side cleat, and use your engine, just kind of turn you and put you into the dock. There's a lot of ways to do it. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Don't fight the boat. Let the boat work for you. That's probably the best thing you can say. Don't, and also don't panic. If you're going to crash into something, get it over.
Yeah. No, don't try to overcompensate and give it more throttle and smash. Just go neutral. Yeah, no, we talk about that all the time. Fortunately, our boats were mostly government boats we learned those things on, so no harm, no foul. But yeah, just go slow.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had the spirit in Honolulu Harbor to do an episode of Charlie's Angels, which dates me. If you ever want to see a fun episode and see my dive boat as a yacht for a gangster, it's the first episode of Charlie's Angels. It was a 2-hour show with Cheryl Ladd, her first time on the show.
That's
And
classic.
we took all the dive stuff off, and they had all the people on the boat. And while we were there, I had one of the local guy named Tom Clark, one of my second tickets. Um, he wasn't as good as running boats. He wasn't used to a 90-foot boat. And so we're in Honolulu Harbor, and he's going to practice. And there's a barge docked, tied up alongside the pier. And he's going to go from one side of the one pier to another pier. And in between was a barge. And it was a very simple, just go right across and go like this and park it. The wind started to get him. He started getting closer to the barge. And here's 3 big turbo diesel engines. He pins it, and instead of just remaining calm, and we could have just bumped the barge. No, he had to take off a hell of a lot of paint and everything as he tried to gun it and get past it, which is bam, we ran into it, and I had the deckhands. Thank God we all saw what was happening. All of a sudden they got some fenders over there.
It was over. Yeah.
But still, so my message to everyone, if you have a boat, don't get flustered. There's a way to work your way out of it. If I was just out with a guy in a boat here not too long ago, and I've been with him on his boat 3 times. 2 of the 3 times he's put his boat in and slipped perfectly. This last time he couldn't do it to save his ass. And it was just one of those things. So Pete, just kind of, here, we got you. So we just let him do his thing. So I got to do it again. Fine. There was a little more wind. He had a little more wind. So that's, if you can use the wind to your advantage, use it. If it's going to be a problem, then just, take your time. Don't get flustered. Let the wind, figure out what's going to happen and give it a shot. Give it a try. And then, fortunately or hopefully you've got somebody on board that can, jump ashore or loop your line around a cleat and you're home free.
Right. So, no, that's all good information. I'm sure we could talk. I have plenty of stories about that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, and some of them involve me too. I'm not going to lie. Going from driving outboard all weekend to doing a checkout on a jet drive, one of the typical Navy SEAL boats you see. I was doing a checkout on that, and I jumped on that boat and went to reverse it out of the slip. And the next thing I was going opposite of where I wanted to go. It took about 30 seconds, but there was an oh shit factor because my boss was sitting right there for about 30. Like, what is this guy doing? Does he know how to drive? But so as far as like your experience operating in bad weather and, what would you say, like when you're dropping divers off, is there a particular like SOP, for lack of a better term, or a procedure that you kind of go through when you approach, like you say, the Benedictos Islands, when you approach those islands, how do you go, okay, I think we should dive here, or I think we should dive here? Is there a procedure you do for that, like in your mind?
Yeah, a lot of it is visual. It's just sort of looking to see, okay, is the water green over here? Like at Benitez, if it's, we dive on the way that Benitez is laid out, if you will. We try to stay on the lee side of an island if we can. Southern California, Baja, the prevailing wind is out of the northwest. So we try to hide behind whatever we can, an island or a point or whatever, so that we don't have the northwest swell or the wind. Sometimes in the summer, however, you've got south swell. If you surf, everyone knows we get a south swell that comes up. The best thing for us when we go down there is have the northwest swell when we're leaving and a south swell develop and gives us a free ride home.
Right.
So we're not punching through it. We're just, it's the best when that happens. And it happens.
Springtime, maybe like late, early summer. Yeah.
Summer. Yeah. So anyway, I look around for, first off, skill level of the divers. Then secondly, just water conditions. And I'm trying, my goal was always to find, for the general divers, not the spear fishermen like Terry Maas and that group, they didn't care if they were getting the crap kicked out of them. They wanted to go where there's fish. But for the typical passengers that I would deal with, it was try to make sure they were going to have a good time. It wasn't going to be overly challenging. And if it was, then we'd have, I'd either have a Zodiac in the water, or I would, we always had probably a 200-foot current line out. So people could, if they surfaced, we tell them dive down the anchor chain. The dive site, everybody, is go down the anchor, because the anchor's that way, and the boat's back here. I anchored here because that's where I want you to go. And sometimes they wind up way over there, and then we go get them. But that's pretty much it. Now, there's a pinnacle off the West Bonita side. Actually, there's two. And one of them is a really nice dive. It's a pretty easy dive. And so I'm anchored on the pinnacle, and one day, quick story, one day, there's a guy and his daughter, and they were little, not iffy divers, just a little, the ones that get off the boat last are usually the ones that are probably the weakest divers. So we're telling them, they're going to come up and go up the anchor chain, go down the pinnacle, make a nice, beautiful dive, see some coral, see some nice fish and all that. And, so we're watching them go up going up the starboard side of the boat. About that time, there's a hammerhead shark on the port side of the boat, and they're gonna go like this. And I think, oh crap! So I yelled at one of the deckhands. He grabbed a mop, and I said, hit the shark. I didn't want them to see it. And so he grabbed the mop, bam, and the shark took off and went that way. And I never told anybody about it. I never told them. Didn't tell anybody on the boat that we even did that.
Yeah.
But that's just one of those little occupational hazards that, I didn't plan on that. It happened to me one more time in Hawaii at Kealakekua Bay. People went on a night dive, and I had the boat all set up and on a mooring, and we've got this nice, beautiful night dive, a newlywed couple. And, night dives are more scary before you get in the water than once you're in the water for people. The apprehension and anxiety is extremely high. But once you're in the water, you're fine.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I assured them there's no sharks. I've never seen a shark in here. You're going to be in 8 feet of water. And sure as hell, yep, that was the night there was a little white tip was swimming around, and they were really pissed off at me and thought that I did that on purpose. It's honest to God. I said, you're going to have everything that I can swear on and tell you the honest to God truth. I've never seen a shark here ever. So I would consider yourselves lucky.
Yeah.
It's a little going, what's going to hurt you?
Well, it's funny because anybody that's, spearfishes or even dives always gets that question. You see any sharks, And it doesn't matter if it's a leopard shark or a 20-foot great white, it's a shark. And people just flip out. So I get it a lot of times in the tropics where we spearfish, there's a lot of sharks swimming around, and they'll they get kind of crazy and go for the fish. And I always tell people, it's yeah, it's a shark. You could get bit just like any other animal around here. It really wants that fish, but people don't care. They I remember at Marineland when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, and this is in the 80s, and this is kind of funny. But I always loved sharks, and I watched all these shark movies and Shark Week. Probably I know about Dangerous Reef, Australia from watching that growing up. It's funny speaking to you about that and hearing Port Lincoln, that whole area, I guess, right? And I remember there was this big tank there that you could snorkel in, and I think they might have had leopard sharks there. But my brother is a couple years older than me, and he jumped in, and swimming. He doesn't really give a shit. And I jump in. I don't really remember how old I was. I might have been. It was before we moved, so I might have been 4. But it was waist deep. You could, it was just a big aquarium. And I put my face in the water, and the first thing I saw was a leopard shark. And I walked on water out of there. I was it just shows you how much shit they put in your brain about sharks. Even as an adult, I don't even watch Shark Week because I don't want that stuff in my mind,
Well, go ahead. Let me tell you, Shark Week used to be really good, and I'm not pimping it because I did a really good show for them with a buddy of mine, Marty Snyderman, called View from a Cage.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
White sharks and all that. But now you got these guys, our replacements in the next generation of filmmakers, and it's all drama. It's all contrived. It's all pre-scripted for the most part, and I'm not going to name names, but you
Got
watch
it.
Shark Week, and I just roll my eyes. But let me tell one. You
Go
can
for it.
really drag these stories out of me. You can't.
That's good.
I don't think about my very first dive as an instructor. I got my very first class, and if you remember back to your first scuba class, those of you that are certified, you remember what happened. You went down in the water. You probably got down on your knees, and you just got in a little semicircle. And the dive instructor, your first thing is take your mask off or you flood it, and then you take the regulator out of your mouth and you blow and you put it back in, and then he shakes your hand and you move to the next person. All right, so I've got the group. We're at the casino area cove at the Coronados because it's nice sandy bottom, flat. And so I've got my group all lined up in my little semicircle, and I'm ready to start. And all of a sudden, it's like all the eyes just went, and I went, the whole bunch of them, they're going, and I'm thinking, holy crap, what's behind me? And I go, well, I better turn around and look. I turn around and look, it's about a 4-foot leopard shark.
Yeah.
But as you said, it looks like a shark, and
Shark, yeah.
I was saying, oh my God, I had a good laugh about it. I explained to everybody, okay, that's a good shark, but anyway, yeah, that's my little leopard shark adventure.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, we've all been there. I guess we're all there at different stages in our lives. Like I was 3 or 4 years old and then getting certified at 12 and going to Catalina and doing that. And then, the boogeyman kind of fades away. And then you meet the boogeyman one day and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, he didn't eat me. Okay. It's a learning process, I feel like, with those guys.
I have a professional relationship with sharks. A lot of people like to eat mako or thresher or whatever. I have a professional courtesy as a dive instructor and a professional in the water that I don't eat them, and they've left me alone. So that's my
Likewise.
Yeah, it's just not me. My mom would say, "Can you bring home some shark meat?" No. You go buy it at Vaughn's if you want it. I'm not. There's no way in hell I'm bringing it home.
It's quite tasty, but I don't know. Like, if you don't mess with me, I don't mess with you.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with that. It's just one of those things. As I would tell the students, we had part of the thing. You have to do a dangerous marine life lecture, sea urchins and sculpins and whatever. And I said, what? The last slide, kind of the joke slide, said, here's the most dangerous marine life you're going to see. And I have a picture of a diver. I said, and here's why. Because if your buddies, you're in low visibility, the diver's the one who's going to kick your mask off. He's going to knock the regulator out of your mouth. He's going to, spin something. It's happened. It's happened to you.
It's happened to me in Hawaii. Yeah.
Yep. And I said, that's probably the biggest danger you're going to have, is your dive buddy's going to do something stupid, on running out from the boat operation side of things. I'm embarrassed to even let anybody look at my feet because I've had so many weight belts dropped on my feet and my toes have been broken so many times. Here's a visual, and this is honest, God. My left big toenail looks like a Frito, and that's just from God knows how many. I went to a podiatrist about 2 weeks ago. He just looked at it and said, "What happened?"
Yeah.
He said, "Which time?" So
yeah.
Anyway, so to me, the most dangerous thing that I've had to deal with in the water has been another diver.
Yeah, the first time diving with my mom, actually, because my mom and dad dove in the 70s, and my mom dove with me, and she jumped in the water in Catalina on this pinnacle about, I guess it was like 90 feet. She jumped in and, of course, popped up like a cork because her weight belt just went down, just took off, so I had to go dive down and get it. But the old classic weight belt falling off with, even being a deckhand on dive boats, it's comical. Yeah, it's like, how much money and gear are you guys losing? Yeah. Well, Dan, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I could literally talk to you for hours, I'm sure.
We'll go episode 2, and I'll tell you about the guy who shot himself with a spear gun. Hold that for next time.
I will. I'm going to write that down right now. That's perfect. Do you have any last recommendations or thoughts or anything you want to share with anybody?
I would. And now remember, this is 2020, and I've been a scuba instructor since 1972. When I was 21 years old, I was captaining a 90-foot luxury dive boat when I was 25 years old, is to pursue your dreams. But more importantly, with all that experience, for all you Spearos, take a freediving course. if the best thing is if you haven't taken one, the stuff I learned, even as a dive instructor, like for example, today I was on the new Facebook page, and somebody asked if it was okay to go free diving and scuba. He works in something as a diver, and can he free dive the same day? And I said no. Well, then Ted Hardy came on and explained why you don't do that. So I learned so much, and I'm not so my ego's not such that I can't say that that I know it all. I don't. I was probably the worst student in my freediving course because I knew too much about scuba diving and maybe making your dive where you're going to make a drop. Well, my drop was the crappiest one of the bunch. You know, I've been in the water my whole life. And so my parting shot would be, if you've not taken the freediving course, take it. Your best thing is if the guy also teaches a spearfishing course, that's the guy you want to take your course from. Take your freediving and spearfishing course, because he'll understand the difference between someone who just wants to go out and see how deep they can go for how long, versus someone that wants to breathe up, go whack a fish.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like Frenzel. What's that? I've been doing Valsalva my whole life.
Me too.
I took a freediving class 3 years ago, and I was super embarrassed because the exact same reason.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I've been diving my whole life. And my friends were like, how do you know so much about all this stuff? And I was like, Frenzel, what's that? I've always just been doing Valsalva. I never have to dive deep where I'm at, so I can just do that. It's fine. This is what I knew. And it changed the game completely. Like, I knew all the buddy stuff and all of that from diving with the Navy and all of the other things. But as far as just those little, 2% of the things that were just game changing. And like you said, the worst spinner in the whole group, but whatever. I don't really give a shit. I'm not trying to impress anybody.
All these guys in the class, they all had these really cool dive computers, and I've got a classic Doxa dive watch that I'm in the water with, and what the hell? I now have a very nice, I think it's an F10, my free diving watch. But I was just, God, I was the worst, But like I said, my ego was such. I learned. I bought the right new stuff. Yeah. I learned a lot, So anyway, that's it. Next time. We'll continue this maybe another time when you run out of good guests. You can I'll come back and tell more sea stories.
Oh, it'd be great. No, it'd be great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys, and hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.